Good morning, everybody. This is the Bethesda Downtown Design Advisory Panel meeting for June 24th, 2020. We have all of the panel members here. We have Xiao Joy, we have George, we have Rod Henderer, Damon, and Carl Dupuis. And this first item is Hampden East. This is for sketch plan review. And so we will be focusing the discussion today on sort of higher level conformance with the design guidelines, concentrating on massing and urban design. Sort of secondarily, if there are things you want to flag to be addressed at site plan, we can do that, but we're going to be focusing on massing and urban design. So the format, again, this is being recorded and the recording will be posted online. And the format will be that the applicant will make a presentation, the panel will ask questions and discuss. Then if there are members of the public who want to provide comment, they will be provided the opportunity to do so. And then the panel will decide if they want to sort of what direction they want to take. If there are things that they think they want to see again with regards to the massing, they can provide that direction. Or if they think that the project is on track to merit the minimum 10 design excellence points, they can take that straw vote and they would not see the project again until site plan. So with that, unless there are questions, I will turn it over to the applicant team.
Great. Good morning. Bob Dalrymple, along with Matt Gordon, our new firm, Selzer Gervich. My background looks a lot like the office I had at Linoes and Blocker, but we're now with Selzer Gervich. We're here on behalf of the applicant for the Hampden East project, which is a venture between Washington Property Company and Douglas Development. With us today is Janelle Cosner and Daryl South with Washington Property, and I'll be turning it over shortly to Robert Sponseller with Shalom Brands, who will expertly lead us through the presentation as usual. The property here is an assemblage of properties that includes the Washington Property headquarters on Hampden, along with the AOTA building and the sites that were previously known for Tommy Joe's and the Pines of Rome. It is adjacent to the 7340 Wisconsin Avenue property, which you have seen recently in the sketch plan for senior housing. The property is to the south of Montgomery Lane, east of East Lane, and north of Hampden. It is in the CR zone with building height of 250 feet, but as you will hear, we are proposing an additional 12 feet by virtue of MPDUs in excess of 17.5%. I think what is wonderful about this project, at least what jumps out to me, is that it is a true mixed-use project where vertically we're integrating the retail with residential and office all in a single tower and all with a shared lobby space. So it's truly providing an 18-hour activity level to the street, and Robert will get into that a lot more. I just wanted to just comment about the design guidelines and how we approach them, and especially this team. You've seen this team before. This is the same team that came to you with the La Madeleine property, 7607 Old Georgetown. So we understand the design guidelines. We also understand that they're not a straitjacket, but instead invite creativity to make the site work within the environment that it is in. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to turn it over to Robert, and thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Sponsler. I'm a design principal with SBA and working on this project with my colleague Sijue Wan, who unfortunately does not have a camera available this morning. I understand that it's better if we turn off cameras, so I just wanted to introduce myself, make a connection, and now I will turn the camera off. And Sijue, if we can open up the PDF, I'll grab control of that portion of it. We have kind of two formats we're going to be using this morning. The first is walking through the PDF that you've probably already seen and reviewed to a certain degree. And then I always think it's important to illustrate the concept. Architecture is a three-dimensional visual art, and we have a software that we use, which is sort of an enhanced SketchUp software called Enscape that we would open up and show you our massing concepts sort of in the context of the buildings surrounding it. So we would do that after after this PDF portion or midway through the PDF portion. Okay, so let's just test and make sure I can advance. Yeah, it's not moving right now, Sijue. I'm not able to. Oh, there we go.
That was it. Yep.
Was that me?
Yep.
Great. All right, it's working. Okay, so it's a delay clearly. So let me back up now. Sijue, can you get it back to the beginning? I don't know what's going on.
Okay, maybe you pushed too many forward.
That's very possible. While we're doing that, you know, my belief is every site plays a role in the larger urban context within which it's located, and this site is no different along those regards. And I think it's the job of the design team and the development team to determine that role and support that role in the urban fabric as part of their development strategy. And so we've attempted to do that today. Just a little bit of orientation. The site is located, you know, sort of midway between the metro, the emerging Purple Line station nearing completion to the south, and the Metro Center to the north. So it's kind of midway between those two transit centers, and also midway between Wisconsin and Woodmont Avenues. So as such, as sort of a site that's in the middle of things, and it's a site that is not on the most prominent location. It's not the most prominent location of Bethesda. It's not along the primary arteries, but it still serves as a critical role and is, to me, very interesting for its sort of interior location and different character versus the typical more visible frontages. Its strategic location is critical to supporting the connections between these various nodes, the transit nodes and the arteries to the east and the west of us. And by that, I mean, supporting the public realm. If we were to do nothing else right on this site, just getting the ground level and the retail planning and allowing something to be built upon to instill connections east to west is our primary goal. But we're obviously more ambitious than that, and we also want to do a building that is appropriately designed and scaled visually above the ground floor to support that character. All right, let's see if that's the right button. Okay, so when I mentioned the unique character of the site, East Lane is unusual in that it's really kind of a two-block street along which our primary frontage, I think, occurs, which is the west side of our facade of our building. And what's unique about it is it terminates at Hampden Lane. It's not a through street, so it's a little less busy than the arteries to the east and west of us. There are also a series of open spaces, kind of a necklace of open spaces between the two metro stations that the site sits along. And these allow you to get away from the building, to step back from the building, to get more of a view from the building and make it a little bit more of a three-dimensional site. In conjunction with the topography that occurs here, there's about a one-story slope from the south to the north along East Lane. So I think that interior quality will make it a very appealing pedestrian street to walk upon. And so that was not lost on us. We wanted to really enhance that experience and take advantage of the visual three-dimensional character of the site from these distant viewpoints. This slide just shows some of these emerging areas that are coming along. Woodmont Plaza, I think, is in the process of being rebuilt as part of the transit hub, finishing up. For Bethesda Metro, there'll be an elevated plaza, I think, eventually, which is to the north of us, that'll give views down the street and very interesting views of the building. And then to our south, I think you recently reviewed Metro Tower, which has an open space that gives a lot of aspect and prospect to the southwest corner of the site. And then the open space at 7272 Wisconsin with the Metro. So taken together, this unusual pedestrian sort of quieter character of the street itself and the exposure and primary corner of the southwest portion of the site were very relevant to us as we developed our thoughts. The existing conditions on the site, this is pretty typical of Bethesda. It's nothing wrong with it, but you can tell a lot of the streets retail was not a priority in the first go around of the development in this neighborhood. And so you see a lot of blank walls, a lot of buildings that don't really address the street per se. There are three buildings on the site, as Bob mentioned. This is a view of the corner of Hampden and East Lane today, and then East Lane looking south from the Metro is on the upper left, looking towards Wisconsin on Montgomery Lane, looking east on the lower right. But taken together, it's an area that's undergoing a lot of change and that presents the opportunity to address the ground plane. As one would expect near Metro, the heights are taller to our north and south, and we sit in a bit of a valley in between those two taller 290-foot allowable heights at 250. Because of the additional MPDU affordable housing, moderately priced dwelling units that we're providing, we're asking for the additional floor as permitted in the zoning code. So from the 250, we're proposing 262 with the additional one floor added to that. And I can come back to these in more detail if anybody would like to. And just looking at the sector plan guidelines, which offer, I think a very appropriate menu of ways to articulate the building and sculpt the building and address the site. We're employing in particular two aspects, the geometry aspect of using an unusual shape and geometry and providing articulation appropriate to the program that we're showing to further enhance the building design. We've also been working, as Bob mentioned, with our neighbors, 7340 to the east, and we have sort of a tower separation distance that we've reviewed with staff a couple of times that we think is appropriate and working to meet the goals of tower separation. And I can speak to those in more detail as well in the slideshow. We always like to do these design principles that help us get through the process. This is a long, entitlements process here in Montgomery County, and we like to just collectively delineate our goals. We find it helpful in all the decisions we make going forward to outline these at the beginning. And so just to highlight a few of these, and I'll focus on what I think is unusual for this project, maybe for you all. And one is this very unusual programmatic stacking that we've developed. It's unusual in this area. You see it somewhat in more in areas like New York and maybe in Asia, but this unusual vertical stacking, there's a section of the west end of DC that also has it. Of putting uses on top of each other is kind of the genesis of the architectural form as well. We've used it for our inspiration of the building massing. And it is innovative and it is unusual, I think. We are providing housing and, as I mentioned, affordable housing, additional affordable housing on site, which is obviously a very important part of the project in this location adjacent to transit particularly. And at the ground level, we're really, I think, doing unusually tall retail infrastructure. The heights on the retail plates vary from about 16 to 25 feet across the site. So it's very ample, wonderful clean retail infrastructure. And that's one of the most important things, as I mentioned at the beginning, putting in infrastructure that'll be flexible over time and adaptable to the changing market needs. You can imagine what's going on with retail today right now. Is very important for the longevity of that public realm design. And then we're embracing biophilic design, also focusing on just general wellness themes, which will also have a benefit in the public realm as part of the project. Biophilic design, if anybody would like, I can speak to later in the presentation. Okay, so sorry, I'll get the timing right soon. The lag is a little bit. So we, beginning with our program, the Washington Property Program for the site was to do two uses, 150 units roughly, and just over 300K of office on the site, in addition to an entire ground floor, as much of the ground floor retail as we could muster on the site. And we began, this first slide is somewhat rhetorical. It just talks a little bit about our process and our thinking. We began by trying to arrange these uses side by side on the site and realized quickly that given a footprint of buildable area on the main floors of about 20,000 square feet, it would not be possible. And for the architects in the room, no, that would not allow these two uses to coexist side by side. So we looked to another strategy, which was what we call the vertical village, where we arrange these uses, red is retail, yellow is residential, blue is office. We stack them on top of each other like a wedding cake. And we articulate the program, the juncture between these various elements become the genesis of the architectural expression. So on the left is the prescriptive envelope from the sector plan. This is part of the creativity and the response to the site that we are employing here. But on the left is this prescriptive envelope. You can see that we didn't quite align with the prescriptive setbacks and the volume that's given prescriptively, and I understand it's just a concept, but the prescriptive volume kind of lacks hierarchy and lacks architectural opportunities for architectural expression. So we, on the right is our approach. We took the program and the genesis of the stacking mentioned in the sector plan as our starting point, and we massaged it slightly to align the setback with the programmatic uses. So the major building setback between the street volume and the upper office volume occurs between the office and the residential. It's about 8 stories in height from the street. The retail and the residential form a second juncture and a second means of expression. And then we enhance that juncture and that setback between what I'll call the street volume and the office tower through various modes of providing sculpting and expression for the office tower itself. And what this allows us to do is create a much more horizontal, I would say street-focused, street-emphasized volume and architectural approach. It also allows us to orient the building to the southwest corner and provide orientation within the context, while all along addressing, the street presence and the public realm in terms of the retail uses. So we're going to walk through that step by step. The other thing that this interesting stacking accomplishes is it puts all of the more of the daytime and evening active uses at the base of the building, which is kind of a wonderful thing. The office, can go a little more quiet in the evenings, except for the lawyers that work long hours, and the bottom floors will be active, from early morning until early evening via the retail and residential expression. So it's a true extended 18-hour day plus, I would say, in that stacking. So we first address the street and these kind of open spaces with an enhanced sidewalk. We'll go through the dimensions of the sidewalk. We want to accommodate outdoor seating for all this retail. And we're addressing all 3 frontages. We're trying to minimize the servicing portals on the east side of the site. We're going to go through the 2 alternates we have there, where I think we're waiting for input from staff and from the planning folks. So maybe it's a good opportunity to weigh in as a DAP review board on the 2 strategies for servicing the building. So we began with the retail. We added above it, we provided a terrace between the retail and the residential, stacked the residential on top of the retail next, formally distinguished the 2 architecturally. And then between the residential and the office, we provide a second break, which is a more enhanced architectural program break, which will have outdoor space for some of the office tenants and common areas for the office tenants. And then we put the office building above and use a different architectural strategy for its expression. And so you can see on the left the precedents for the uses, the idea of embracing outdoor space, articulating the independence of the program elements, which we'll do architecturally with facade, in addition to the formal massing approach, and addressing the public realm in terms of retail, and giving us a full day. You can see the clocks on the right that fill out our day and night very actively. So to me, the beauty of the sketch plan process is that it allows us to articulate our commitments and our common goals at a very high level, as Elza mentioned, at the beginning of this process, of this long 4.1 process. And what I think is important about that is we get early input on those design principles, let's say, and the commitments on the setbacks. But I agree with whoever mentioned earlier that, what's important about this process is that it allows the team to further develop and further enhance the architecture as you move forward. So this slide is also somewhat an idea about showing the range of ways we can accommodate the commitments we're making, and I'll go through each of those in terms of the sidewalk and the street volume to upper volume setbacks. But this slide and these models just really illustrate how we can develop the building slightly differently, working within these commitments. And we have a lot of work to do in terms of the residential design, the office floor plates, determining the structural columns, how we'll sort through all of that. I think all three of these options show that there's a way to develop the building in an interesting fashion within these parameters. And we don't want to handicap ourselves by committing to one specific volumetric and massing approach so early, other than the commitments we're making about expression of the street volume and setbacks and the articulation of the southwest corner. I'm going to articulate those commitments very clearly shortly. The next three slides just talk about our considerations going forward in terms of the exterior. I think I'm stuck. There we go. Beginning with massing. So these are some precedent images of buildings that either have, top and bottom massing stacked or employ interesting sculpting, maybe call it light sculpting architecturally. And the bottom left image on the precedence page shows a strong expression of a kind of a mid-building break as a way to articulate the building vertically and give the building a horizontal emphasis. So these are precedents about our various massing approaches. The next slide speaks to biophilic design, which involves improving human wellness and reducing stress through interactions with nature. They're done either in simulacra, in recreating spatial conditions found in nature, or in most directly contact with nature. So that's another theme that we'll be employing throughout the design. For both uses. And finally, considerations of building skin. So on the upper left is a building I designed a few years ago for JBG. It's right around the corner down the street, but it has a very simple, clean architectural facade. And other office building on the lower right is another simple facade. The residential facade will probably have a little stronger character. It'll have interior setbacks for balconies and outdoor space as we develop it. But these two buildings on the upper right and lower left are examples of residential buildings. Both happen to be, I think one is on Bond Street and one is near Bryant Park. So on the left is that option 3 massing, where we used more of a cubist sculpting of the building base and tower. And now to the sketch plan commitment. So these are the same three options I showed you in massing. And again, just to show the range of expression that we want to allow ourselves, if you would indulge us going forward. Beginning with the sidewalk, I'm going to walk through all the commitments we're making. So on Montgomery Lane, we have our widest sidewalk at 20 feet in width. On East Lane, we have a 17-foot wide sidewalk minimum. And on Hampden Lane, we have a 15-foot sidewalk minimum. And I will tell you that we're expanding beyond that. You'll see in the floor plans in a moment at the corners to create outdoor seating opportunities. We think the southwest corner is probably one of the best opportunities for outdoor seating. When you transition from the street volume to the tower, there's another series, and those sidewalk setbacks are in red for each of these seams, and they're actually very similar. The street volume to tower setbacks, we're actually aligning the volumes on Montgomery Lane, and that is our shortest frontage. It's not our probably not our most pedestrian street in terms of connections. That would probably be Hampden and East Lane. But we are providing an architectural break between the uses on Montgomery Lane. So they're aligned, but they're still articulated and broken down. That frontage represents about 20% of our total street frontage. The majority of our frontage is East Lane and Hampden Lane. Those setbacks are 10 feet along East Lane. And on Hampden, what we're asking and proposing is the equivalent of a 5-foot continuous setback, but arranged appropriately for the site. So either a big notch or a splay or a fold to articulate that 5-foot setback. On the east side of the site, working with our neighbors, we've accommodated a similar setback area to 7340. We worked together with them in the past few months to agree to open up the aperture to the south between the two buildings, open up the court between them, and then splay differently between the two buildings on the north. But each building is providing a setback that allows the total tower setback to range from 30 to 60 feet across the site. Okay, I think this is well, we'll do the sidewalks first, and then we'll switch. I'm just giving Seedway a heads up that we're going to be coming back to her in a minute to open the Enscape models and walk through those three proposals in the Enscape model live. This is a diagrammatic document of the commitments in terms of the setbacks for the three options. Things are the same on Montgomery and Hampden, where we're agreeing to a 5-foot minimum that's opened and expressed at the corners. 10-foot on East Lane is also agreed to between them, but we're just doing it slightly differently. In one of the massings, the street volume pairs back a bit, and the other massing, it holds the line, let's say, of the street volume a little more strongly. In all cases, the retail holds the build-to line at the base of the building. So, and as I mentioned, the other thing these illustrate is that there will be carving and setbacks provided for outdoor space for the residential units. You know, one of the great things about urban residential living is having a small terrace or a small patio that we would internalize. There'll be some terrace locations, but most of it would be internalized within the volume, and it'll perform another layer of sculpting that we'll be showing you soon for site plan. Cedre, how are you?
Hi, Robert. I'm good.
Can we switch to Enscape? I'll stop my control and we'll switch to the live model. And we're going to begin with what we called option 1, which I think I called a folded massing approach. Now for each of these models, this will only take a couple minutes to walk through, but then we can certainly come back and focus on any details you all have. But we're trying to show how the building is viewed from the public realm. This is an aerial image to describe the massing approach, but we're going to show you views from the street, from the corners, from the Metro Tower Plaza, I'm calling it for one of its official name. And we're going to start with what I called the folded scheme, CJ, where we have a couple of aerial views. We'll just go around the site. This is the southwest aerial showing the folding and dimpling of the office building above the street volume. And we go to the northwest view, CJ. Please be patient, folks. There might be a lag in the computer system. So this is looking at that first massing from the northwest, looking southeast. You can see how we folded back the base adjacent to our neighbor to provide some alignment. And we're also expressing the retail very strongly around the site, in addition to the podium break between the office and the residential. And then we have a couple street views. First, from the northwest corner, from the street volume, you get a sense of the way the massing splays back and forth to create adjacent compatibility and outdoor spaces. And we have a view from the southwest, I believe, next. This is from the main corner, where we think is one of our primary outdoor seating areas. Then we have a view from the plaza, Cedre, at Metro Tower, which is a view we really relish. It really highlights this corner of the building when you're coming out of Metro, shows the strong setback and the visibility that this corner will have when you're walking up and down the Elm Street, East Lane walking area. And then from Wisconsin. And from Wisconsin, this is an aerial view to show how we fit into the context, and then a street view showing the street volume, the retail volume, and the terracing that we're putting between the retail and the residential. Okay, option 2 is a little different, but still holds to the common principles. It has a different characteristic in terms of the office sculpting. It pairs back the corner more dramatically between the two buildings with some subtle folds that carry up the south side of the building, again addressing this important southwest corner, and it has a little bit more articulation in the residential volume above the retail. So we can go through these, Cedre, go to the northwest. Similar approach along Montgomery Lane. You can see the 20-foot sidewalk The building above comes out 5 feet over that to the 15-foot build-to line, but the sidewalk is at 20. And then a view down at street level from that corner, showing the experience. This one is similar on Montgomery Lane to the first option, but diverges a little bit on the southwest corner, Cedre. We go to the next one. So here we've articulated the residential a little bit further, but you get a sense of the sculpting of the office above, the retail corner setback to provide outdoor seating, and that expression of a gap or a void between the two uses in the street volume. And then from the plaza. This one has a little more going on in terms of this corner at the plaza. The lighting's not allowing us to see some of that sculpting there, Cedra. I don't know if that's easy to adjust the sun a little bit. You can see the office full, but you're not seeing the residential quite as strongly. That's, yeah, maybe that's okay. I think the next view will show it. And then we go to the Wisconsin view, the character along the sidewalk. So looking from slightly elevated to looking from the street level, here you get a good sense of how the paring back of the office building has given the street volume more presence, and then the stepping of that street volume into 3 or 4 distinct sections above the retail. And then the last option is the option 3 is a little more of a cubic approach to the sculpting, where we're stepping volumes back, modeling the base even further for the residential use, starting with the southwest, and always carrying a strong sense of corner on that southwest corner. But Montgomery is also very important, and I think these pair up nicely with our neighbor and address that frontage appropriately. This is the aerial from the northwest, and then we have a street view from the northwest. Getting a sense of those volumes, the bays and the balconies above the retail, and that large corner cutout for the office. We go to the southwest view. Here we go. Again, always a strong corner on the southwest. This one's a little more articulation than the option 2. And then from the plaza, very dynamic, interesting view of the building as you come out of Metro and Purple Line. And then Wisconsin. And then Wisconsin from the street. So we can certainly come back to these in the interest of time. I'm going to finish the presentation, and then we can open up to questions, and we can keep the SketchUp and Enscape handy, Cedra, if you don't mind. Is it possible to pass the PDF back to me now?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so these are the street sections that, again, define and those commitments that we're providing around the perimeter between the sidewalks and the street volume. And then we're going to go through the floor plans. And I'm going to start by showing these 2 alternate, sorry for the delay, folks. It's not advancing. I'm going to start by showing these 2 alternate ways to service the site. So, oh, there it goes. Back 1, 2. Hopefully this gets me in the right spot. There we go. Okay, so we are putting this site into context with our 7340 neighbor, our Metro Tower neighbor, and just thinking about the ground level uses. We want to minimize obviously the servicing component and celebrate the retail and the other active uses. So the intent, I will say, from ownership is that this lobby become part of an open retail experience. So really the entire ground floor will be an interconnected an interplay between these various retail users and the office and the residential lobby. So we're getting away from a formal office lobby and creating more of a shared experience in the ground level. The servicing that we're showing in option A is arranged on the very eastern side of the site. Part of our thinking here was, we noticed what had been proposed next door, where I'm not sure, I could be wrong, and correct me, Elza, if I am wrong, but I'm not sure there's any retail at the ground level next door. But there is a considerable amount of, let's just say, vehicular servicing component directly to the east. If there is retail, I apologize on that, and I would welcome the input. But we
Robert,
thought that
there's retail. I'm sorry, this is Elsa. There's retail on Wisconsin Avenue, but not on Hampden.
okay, so it's up here somewhere. This looks like a lobby, so maybe it's up here in the northeast corner. Okay, thank you. We'll adjust that, Elsa. But we thought that given the need for the drop-off that they have and the servicing elements, and this is a unique use here, we thought it would be good to minimize the impact on Hampden and try to stretch the retail as far as we could up the street. Similarly, on Montgomery, we're stretching the retail as far east as we possibly can with, in this option, a parking entrance on Montgomery and loading off of Hampden. So that's option A related to servicing. We also have drawn a second option, and I think we're waiting for input from the traffic folks in Montgomery County and officially from staff guidance. We're showing a combined loading and service. And this just merely swaps the ramp to the other side and takes all of that frontage and puts it on the Hampden side of things as concisely as we possibly can, of course, consolidated to one location. The retail in that case on Montgomery would extend further towards the east, and we'd still have our primary anchor on the southwest corner. We're looking at enhancing this space, trying to push the core a little bit north so we could get even better retail infrastructure in that plan. Those are the two alternates. We'd love your input. I'm sure you'll give it to us regardless. And then to walk through the floor plans kind of very high level in the interest of time, and I can come back to these, you can see the various use floor plates. So ground level retails I just showed you with our second option, the residential floor, typical residential floor of which there are 7 above. And then on the office side of things, this happens to be the first option, the folded option, the office floor plates that are market size to be, minimally market size to accommodate market needs, but office at the hyphen, office typically, and then office rooftop to provide outdoor space. And with that, I think the last drawing is a section. I would turn it back over to Elsa and Paul and others to get any questions, but this is a cross section east-west just showing, this happens to be for option 1, showing the retail aligned with the sidewalk, the setback between 0 and 10, it varies for the street volume, the office held back at 10, and then our setbacks above that vary between ourselves and our neighbor between 30 and 60 feet of setback total. So Elsa, that's a very high level review, and I'd be happy to go back to any slide, open the Enscape as needed.
This is Bob Dalrymple. Sorry to interrupt there, but it just in the interest of full disclosure, we are wanting to show exactly what Robert has up on the screen now, the alternative ways of servicing the building. We have received some preliminary feedback from both the planning staff and McDOT, where their preference for the other plan with loading operations and the parking garage both on Hampden as the preferred option. I think primarily the concern at Montgomery Lane is a two-way bike lane that is being added to Montgomery and the concerns about conflict. But we thought it was important to still show the alternative designs and to get the feedback from an architectural standpoint from this panel before making any decisions as to whether we were going to try to be very persuasive. I think it's fair to say that our preference is to split up the operations as Robert was indicating, and for those reasons. But I did want to just make it known that we have heard some preliminary feedback from both staffs and their preferences for us to combine the loading and the parking to Hampden.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Robert and Chijue and Bob. So we'll turn it over to the panel now. I think while the loading is important, I don't think it's the primary issue that we want to talk about. So again, at sketch plan, I think we want to be focusing on the massing and the design guidelines. This project has in the options, several points where the upper floors of the building are projecting over the lower floors of the building, and that has been sort of a difficult issue that I think the DAP has been dealing with since the beginning. So I want to make sure that the DAP addresses that. But with that, I will turn it over to the DAP members for questions and comments.
This is Chow Joy. I do have a question. This is great presentation. There's a great change between Montgomery Lane and Hampden. Can you elaborate that? Because they will make the base height higher in one side, right? In one.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So what our base range is, starting with Hampden, it's about 84 feet on Hampden Lane, which is our measuring point, and it adds another 10 feet because of the sloping of the site, another story as you move north around the block and to directly, I will say it like this, basically it's 8 stories, but 85 feet here due to our tall retail, and it adds a story to that height, so 95 on the north side on Montgomery Lane. And that's partially due to the sloping condition of the sidewalk, as you mentioned. It's a 10-foot change.
Right, but due to the guideline, we have 3 to 6 stories of base, and now we have 8 stories. How do you justify that?
Well, we have a certain program that we need to accommodate on the site, and we think that when you look at the building and it's in relation to the other sites, through some of these methods of setbacks and sculpting, we think we can be compatible. We're also providing a very large expression of the retail at the ground level, which will soften that, I think, that 8-story volume a bit. So through those, we think that architecturally we can mediate that concern.
So this is Damon. I'll jump in and say just from the outset that great presentation. I'm generally impressed with the project. It looks like you guys are working hard on this. Hell, I don't know if I've just been in quarantine too long or what, but Elsa had mentioned that there are some cantilevers being proposed in the various options. Can you guys highlight exactly where those are in the various options?
Certainly. Do you want to focus on, so you can see that architecturally we're doing cantilevers between the office and the residential. The cantilevers that you may be referring to that were, I think, cited in the report, I think the focus was on the corner here. And what we're doing is we're extending our southwest corner over the to the property line, essentially at the southwest corner of the site, about 8 feet at that corner extreme. It becomes a cantilever because we're enlarging the sidewalk, though, I will say. So we're trying to create a cafe zone at that southwest corner. And because we're setting back the retail there to create that cafe zone, that creates a cantilever. But some of that space is going beyond the building line, but primarily at that corner. That's really the only place where we're going beyond the building lines from sidewalk setback perspective are the southwest corner. Montgomery Lane, we're setting back 5 feet and creating a cantilever to have a 20-foot sidewalk. So that's a second one, but that one doesn't go beyond the building line, and it becomes the edge of our street volume. As you can see, each of these building shapes is a little bit different and is employing cantilevers for the office building, but those do not exceed beyond the setbacks that we've shown, and those are kind of interior cantilevers. So if you were talking specifically about cantilevers over public space, it's really the southwest corner. And we could pare it back if folks wanted to pare it back. We liked the expression at the corner. We thought it was a nice way to celebrate that corner, but that's why we're meeting with you.
And that cantilever in the southwest corner that you're referring to, that occurs in all 3 options, correct?
It's common to all 3 of these. Let's call it the nose of the building on the southwest corner. It's common to all of those, and it's about 8 feet over the build to line at that southwest corner.
Okay. I think I understand it now. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure the other ones, there's other it's an architectural mode of expression that we like, so we use it up in the building for articulation. But I'm sure that the one you're interested in is the one that's over the sidewalk, and that one is only happening at the southwest corner.
Maybe you could go to that perspective looking down Hampden.
Sure.
See.
Let me just see. We may have to go back to you, CJ, but let me see if I can find it. Well, yeah, I think we need to go back to Enscape, CJ, for the 3 schemes. So I'll pass it back to you, CJ. Yeah, there we go. And maybe just move down the street, CJ. Go to option 2 or option 3. I think this is option 3. This is fine. Yeah, so there you can see how it cantilevers over the sidewalk. Now we are pushing the sidewalk in. So part of this, oops.
Right.
This is a test of our technology. Hey, CJ,
Just
go to
give me a second.
please go
Right.
to the southwest corner. And
Southwest corner.
yeah, street level view. Yeah, there we go. And I think you could, move in a little bit, CJ, go down to eye level so they can really get a good sense of it. I want everybody to understand it. So again, some of this is self-imposed because we've pushed the retail back. It exposes that corner, but in terms of being over the build to line, it's about 8 feet at the most prominent part of that corner. So right here. Oops. So right there, it's 8 feet. And we could open another one and show you another one, but this is option 2. And just, CJ, if you could just go to the park view and go in a little bit, let them get a sense of it. I think it's good to use this as a tool to understand it. So there it is from the park side. There's a setback between the retail and the residential above, but there you get a sense for, the size of that cantilever. It's about 8 feet over the build to line. Exaggerated here because we've set in the retail to create an outdoor cafe. So maybe just go to Hampden, CJ, and just look up from Hampden, turn around towards, just move up Hampden towards Wisconsin just a little. Yeah. Other way, CJ.
And this is Elza. While she's doing that, as I mentioned in the memo, the use of an overhang is not strictly forbidden, but that it needs to serve an important urban design architectural function, and not just, I think most of the ones that we've seen have been sort of efforts to capture FAR. And so I think that, highlighting in the discussion sort of why they are important in terms of the urban context and the overall design, and not just sort of an FAR capture, I think is something important, I think, for the discussion, then also for the application.
Yeah, and Elza, I will say this is not an FAR grab. CJ, can you back up Hampden just a little bit and you may have to turn off the building across the street, CJ, to look up at the building appropriately. Just turn off Metro Tower for a spell so they can get a good sense of it. This is not at all about FAR. It was really about just creating an interesting southwest corner, folks. And we can push these in if you'd like us to. We have no problem doing that. It was about creating an interesting corner for us and celebrating these different program elements. There we go. Stay right there, CJ. That's good. So we just thought that given the park, you get multiple distant exposures of this corner, and it would just be a shame to have a flat building. The views from the south, the views from the west, and the views coming down Wisconsin, we thought were all enhanced by these setbacks. I will say that early on in the project, in the process, and I think some of the architects in the room can vouch for this, when you're just looking at a massing model, sometimes you need to exaggerate some of the moves to make the building interesting as a sort of a clay model type aspect. So I could see these becoming a little more subtle as we move forward. But the general idea we'd like to put before you is the idea that this corner has visual interest, architectural sculpting, let's call it, And I think it may be a matter of degree in terms of how far we push things over that sidewalk.
This is Rod Hinderer. Like others, I'm very impressed with the project, and it's a beautiful presentation. I think the vertical arrangement of the various program pieces is really, really great. I think, as you may know, the issue of overhang has not gotten a lot of positive public response in Bethesda. And I think this is probably a touch point in Bethesda within the community that will not react in, let's call it, a positive manner. And I also look at the perspective you have up here right now, and it seems, I like the office tower above it. I like the various options you have on the office tower, but this seems to be kind of overly complicated. I think there's a very important vista and a progression of people as you walk through the public space you have in the foreground. And I think there may be other ways of doing it without necessarily doing it with the overhang, creating an architectural expression to it.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a comment that Hampden Lane is a very narrow street already. And with the new buildings that are going around, there's the juxtaposition of the two north, your building and one in the south is going to create a compression of space above the ground level. And I wonder if, I understand what you're doing and I appreciate the turning the corner with covered open space. But when you particularly look down from Wisconsin Avenue, the jutting out component, to me, does two things. It signals something special happening at that intersection, which is good, but it also signals what appears to be something very heavy hanging over the public space. That's just a reaction. I suspect that pulling that back or doing something else with it may make it more palatable to those that will be looking at this going forward.
Okay.
I think this is Paul Mortensen. We spoke about this earlier, and I think that the importance of that corner coming across the plaza from Elm Street through the backside of the new proposed development on the south of you guys, I think is very important. So that relationship, I think, is can be very strong, and I support it. But I also agree that the prominence of the overhang, I think, is a problem, and I think that it is a problem on Hampden in compressing that view. And I think it just seems very, for some reason, I guess also I wonder about, I mean, I conceptually I understand the separation of the three different uses, but I also wonder if the separation between the retail and the residential at the base, that is so pronounced in this scheme is warranted. I wonder if there's maybe a stronger relationship between the two as part of, that lower podium mass under the office. I mean, certainly you would want some expression of a base within the podium, but I mean, to really separate it, of one floor at the base, one floor above it, and then a couple floors above that, they're almost too equal. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if a stronger maybe base would be a way of maybe easing the need for the cantilever, when viewed from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But also giving you a very strong corner. I think that corner is very important.
Agreed.
But the reason you're pulling the retail back is to get wider sidewalks, correct?
Yeah, we are setting back the retail, pushing it back from the build-to line to create sidewalk zones. There's two reasons for that. One is, I think, Paul and Elza, you're permitted to use, I think, up to 5 or 10% only of your open space, even though we're required to provide 10% open space. I think only 5 to 10% of it can be used for seating, if I'm not mistaken. So to create, let's say, a cafe zone, one needs additional open space. So that's part of the reason that we're doing that.
Mhm.
One of the challenges, yeah.
But in order to reduce this cantilever and still maintain open space, meaning your drywall, require pulling the facade of the residential back.
I couldn't quite catch all of that, Guy.
Okay. I think we've said that you're pulling the retail back in order to
Yes.
get the
Yes.
width of sidewalk that you need. The only
Exactly.
way to eliminate the cantilever is not to pull the retail forward, but to pull the residential back,
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
which obviously may programmatically be complicated.
Yeah. Look, it would be a lot simpler for us as architects to have a straight volume here. Don't get me wrong. We thought that the sculpting was adding something. Maybe it's a little heavy right now, but I think your comment, Paul, about integrating the retail a little more strongly with the residential is good. We'll be careful with the overhang breadth and depth. We'll study that a little further. But I do think that the sculpted corner is important. Some degree of sculpting at the corner is important, just in terms of where the building's located in this context, and it's just too nice of an opportunity not to capture it. And this is probably the most viable outdoor seating area of the three locations, of the three frontages. This is probably the most important.
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. But I think those are all good comments.
Well, I don't know where we're almost out of time, but I really do think that the presentation was excellent, and I think the concepts are working for me. And I'm not sure that I don't agree with the overhang generally as you're showing them. I think it could work out very well.
Mm-hmm.
One, going back about two things. One, I really wish GDOT would allow you to split the access between drive-in cars and loading. I'm really concerned about the experience on Hampden Lane with your neighbors drop off right there. Their loading is coming in there, then your loading is coming in, and an additional driveway. I think Hampden Lane is going to be a disaster. And one way to help that a lot would be to put the garage entrance on the north facade. The second thing is your neighbor, when they were with us, the alley that goes between the two buildings, they manipulated their facade pretty significantly, and we all were very intrigued with the fact that it points it's wider, points it's narrower. You chose to do a straight line for your facade on that particular eastern facade at ground level. And
Right.
I something in my mind says maybe a little less harsh might be good to reflect what's happening on the east side or your adjacent neighbors.
Okay. Noted. CJ, can you go to that service plan if there's any other discussion on that? There we go. I agree with you, Guy, on the servicing. If we could get that to work, it's all about balance. I know there's a bike lane on the north side, and that's important also. But it's not. This isn't trucks maneuvering. This is cars maneuvering. So maybe there's a way to get that to work. But I just think Hampden Lane is one of the more pleasant streets, and it would be wonderful to have a little more retail there.
Absolutely.
And especially with that plaza across the street.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you even wonder what kind of retail would be successful on Montgomery Lane anyway, because it doesn't get a lot of footfall on it. I don't know that it ever will.
No, I don't think so.
Yep.
It's just, it's the only thing. It's the bike.
Right.
A great place for a bike shop. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I know that Elza said we don't need to focus a whole lot on this issue, but to me, Elza, with all due respect, I think that we do, because if this is truly the preferred plan, I think that we have a lot of persuading to do, both with your staff and with McDOT, based on what I've heard thus far. So
yeah, and that goes without saying. I wasn't saying it was a non-issue. It just wasn't the most important issue. We are running out of time. I don't think we've heard from Carl. Carl, did you want to provide any comments?
Yes, there might be a way to combine the two sites in terms of an alley going all the way through. It would seem to me that it seems redundant to have, both going down and both coming up on both sites, because there might be combining those. That would be one thing. Number two, the cantilever, I think in the presentation, it's much heavier feeling than actually when you were talking about 4 and 5 and 6 feet. It
Yeah.
looked much wider than that. And so to me, I think it could be a lot more subtle and a lot less aggressive.
Yeah.
In so many words. But I like the idea of pushing and pulling and making this much more dynamic than a straight jacket, pull up of the base and then having the separation. But I think the presentation is very, very impressive, and I'm very happy. I'm confident that you can pull this off. But I think the servicing and the parking is an issue, and it just seems to me that a coordinated effort between the two properties might solve the problem.
I think that's a very good suggestion. So in the interest of time, do we have, are there any other comments from the panel before we see if there are any members of the public?
I just one more comment. This is Paul again. One more comment is, and I don't recall, but I think it probably goes without saying, the single base story retail base at Hampden that you were showing, I think is also in maybe an issue on the East Lane side, because it is facing that plaza. Very unfortunate, very nice plaza that seems to be very rarely used on the other side. And so hopefully this project would provide a lot of life, to that plaza. But having a single story, a prominent single story facing that plaza, I don't know if that's a good thing or if maybe a little, the perception of a little bit of more height at the base facing that plaza might be a good thing.
Okay. CJ, can you go to the massing summary page, please?
So while she's doing that, do we have any members of the public that wanted to provide comments? I think we only had one guest. Okay, so did you want to address that very briefly as we're 7 minutes into the next item? Or do you understand Paul's question? And
I completely understand Paul's comment. Okay. I think as part of the evolution of the project, Paul, can sort itself out. I think it is worth studying the more integrated retail option that you mentioned and the integrated residential and retail as we go forward. I think these are all good comments, frankly. And I will say that, when you're early in the game, and we are, that, sometimes these folds on as I call it, a clay massing study, sometimes we have to exaggerate them to see them because we don't have facade materials, et cetera, to highlight them. So sometimes they come off as a little exaggerated. I am very sensitive to the overhang as you're mentioning it, as everyone has pointed out. So we would study that very carefully, obviously. Our main emphasis here was just trying to show ways to articulate this and strengthen the corner, both on the office and the residential and retail side of things. And but I think these have been really helpful comments.
Very good. Thank you very much. So at this point, as we wrap up, the panel has two options, and it's really whether or not the panel wants to see the project again at the sketch plan stage. So is this something that the panel wants to see developed further, or is the preference to allow them to move forward to continue to develop, and you wouldn't see it again until site plan?
This is George. I'm confident it'll develop well, and I could wait till site plan.
I agree.
I agree.
Agree.
I concur.
Okay,
Same
very
here.
good. So, so I'm going to just formalize what I think was just a straw vote. So at this point, the panel will then take a straw vote as to whether or not the project is on track to meet the minimum 10 design excellence points with the issues identified, which are primarily addressing the overhang, looking at the relationship between the rear facades, and studying the potential for shared service access between the two buildings, though I think with a clear preference for the split service between Hampden and Montgomery. Can I get who's in favor? Those in favor of it moving forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we have the votes to move forward. So thank you very much. This concludes the discussion of this item. The panel members will need to hang up and call in to the next item. So each of the items today will be a separate call. And so I would ask the panel members to hang up and go to the next item, and we will see you there in just a moment.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you,
Robert.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, thank you for your
Bye.
time.